Okay, hello everyone. In my blog I talked about some innovative approaches in education, and today I'd like to talk about peer instruction. Peer instruction was developed in the early 1990s by Eric Mazur, who was a professor of physics at Harvard, and it is an interactive teaching method, and at the core of peer instruction are so-called concept tests. And they have the following structure. First, the professor asks the students a question, a conceptual question, which they then think about it for a minute and a half, and answer. And they answer by show of hands or through the use of technology, clicker technology, for example. In the next step, they are inclined to discuss their individual answers with their neighbors, and convince their neighbors of their own answer and discuss which is the right one. And they then again indicate their answers, and at the end an explanation by the professor follows. The underlying basis of peer education is the assumption that teaching or education is a two-step process of one, transfer of information, and two, assimilation of information. And peer instruction holds that assimilating the information, so teaching how to use the information, should be part of in-class teaching. And Eric Mazur himself refers to peer instruction as teaching semi-Socratically, that is, teaching by questioning and not by telling as in traditional lectures. And feedback is very important in peer education as well, as it basically constantly happens in class, because the students get to know where they stand in comparison to the rest of the class, and get to know where they maybe have to improve their learning. There is high active student engagement through the use of concept tests. They are in constant engagement practically, and this is a very positive factor. There's a trade-off, or this is one point of criticism, that there's a trade-off between content and coverage, because using peer instruction does not always allow for covering all the content that is part of a curriculum. But Eric Mazur argues that this is not so important when you have the possibility to reduce coverage a little, but significantly increase comprehension. I'm going to come back to that later, what teaching really is, what's the definition of teaching. Others like Nicolas Negroponte and Sugata Mitra have even asked the more radical question whether knowing is obsolete. The most important feature of peer instruction is, though, that better understanding leads to better problem solving, but not necessarily vice versa. This is very important to understand, because peer instruction tackles conceptual understanding. And Eric Mazur found in one of his classes, for example, that 6 of his students who got 100%, the maximum score on the test of normal problem solving, weren't even able to get one single point on a conceptual test. Through peer instruction, not only conceptual understanding can be increased, but also problem solving. But if you focus on problem solving, this does not necessarily mean that understanding actually takes place and learning takes place. So it's interesting when you look at the definition of teaching. So if you say that the primary aim of teaching is to produce learning in others, then there are strong arguments for using peer instruction. However, our perceptions of what is teaching may be very different, and Tikva analyzed this in a study she did with middle school children in Israel, and she tested them on their perceptions of what was teaching. There were 3 conditions: direct transmission, which is very similar to traditional lecturing. It means that the direction of the teaching is mainly from teacher to student. There's rather passive student engagement. The student is mostly a listener. The second condition was Socratic teaching, so teaching by questioning, where the instructor guides the learner to the right answer. And then the control condition that was conversation. And she found that only direct transmission was actually perceived as teaching by all participants. And both Socratic teaching and conversation were not considered as teaching. What are the results of peer instruction? Here we have some survey data. And here you can see that peer instruction has been used across institution types, different institution types. In this survey, mostly universities, but also colleges, community colleges, and high schools, across different subject areas. In this case, it's mostly physics, and in different countries. So in this survey, there were 384 participants, which were instructors, having used some sort of peer instruction or peer instruction-like teaching method. Here are some results that show the gain in learning that can be produced by peer instruction. The sample here was 30 courses of peer instruction, where the instructors provided quantitative data. Usually this is done by gathering pre- and post-tests of forced concept inventory. So those are tests that aim to assess the conceptual understanding. So on the vertical axis you can see the gain, the learning gain, and on the horizontal axis you see the pre-test score. And the medium G range, most of the courses in the survey, so 27 out of 30, 90%, fall in this medium G range, whereas none of the traditionally taught courses, so through lecturing, fall in this range. So the learning gain produced by peer instruction was significantly higher than the learning gain produced by traditional lecturing. So in conclusion, although there's some criticism and some room for improvement, and peer instruction has to be adapted according to the specific environment in which it is used, it has been shown to be effective in increasing students' conceptual learning and also problem solving. Thank you very much. If you have questions, pass them now.
An observation. I think peer instruction is good. I think if you think about how you would design a curriculum, I think that before you have peer instruction, you have to have a foundation of knowledge, so you know. I think peer instruction is kind of getting your head wrapped around what the principles are, what you've already learned. And then I would think a class like this would come after that, where you rely on you to use whatever you've learned in your psychology degree to apply those principles to a broad area like education.
Before coming to class, the students are given a pre-reading assignment, so all the coverage takes place outside of the class. So this has been criticized as well. This is one of the reasons why coverage is somewhat reduced, because it will be maybe too much for the students to read everything at home, but clearly this is the basis, of course, for discussion in class.